McKenrick.
Good to hear you again, Elliot.
I was going to say, hey, good morning to you. How are you doing, dude?
Oh, killing it. Just like, just living the backpacker's life, so still riding the bicycle, still bike commuting, still trying to save the world.
One step and one pedal at a time. God bless you, Rue. God bless you. Yeah. I drove in with the windows down today. Anyway.
Well, the windows are always down in this area.
You know what? Touche.
Don't have any windows.
Exactly. How can they be up? How can they be up? So, Rue, I'm just for brevity's sake, the last time that you and I talked, we covered it. We covered a ton of stuff, including the fact that obviously I don't think you've had anything but a bike for the last 5,000 years. But we talked about the American Perimeter Trail, right? And how it was your idea that you were going to connect everyone in the country to create a trail system, if you will, that would kind of connect everybody in the country and make a national trail system. And we talked about that a little bit. I don't feel like we got as deep into it as well. So now you wrote 4 volumes of this book. You were nice enough to send me the first volume. Can I ask you this though, real quick? Why are we separating it into 4 volumes, and when do I start getting more volumes?
Okay, well, it's just I sometimes read 1,000-page books, but this is the way that I prefer to consume my own reading. So I just wrote it the way that I would like to read it. So that's the reason that it got split up.
Rue, and a great idea, because I'll tell you this. I got volume 1 and thoroughly enjoyed it. If you would have sent me 1,000-page book to preview before being able to talk to you, we would not be talking.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for this first one to come out. And like you mentioned, there's 3 more. And it basically, each book is a couple thousand miles of the 14,000 mile trek.
Hey, did I know from the last time we talked, Rue, where the actual idea for the Perimeter Trail came from, that it was while riding on a ski lift at a ski resort?
Yeah. I it was just a normal day. Everyone wants a Genesis story of this kind of bright light moment. And it was just a normal day at the ski hill. And this idea came to my mind that America needed a perimeter trail and an interconnected trail system, and that not only could I hike this, but I could also be the one who started the organization that was going to actually put it on the ground and build it.
And you mentioned early in the book, and you alluded to it, that you're still riding a bike and backpacking, and that's your life. That's your way of life. But you talk about early in the book how you were you were dressed like a ninja in all black, riding your bike. But you worked for a billionaire who owned this large plot of land. What were you doing working for this billionaire?
Well, it was just one of those situations, Elliot, where I was, over the years, taking different seasonal work and making sure that I had time out of the year to travel. And it was just a situation where I was just working seasonally, and I was too hard of a worker, and I worked myself into a supervisor position.
Right.
So, yeah. So, it wasn't ever really intended to be that way, but it was a great way to spend time outside, and it was something to do for the time and make a living.
But you also make it sound like he owned all this land, but the land was being sold off and chopped up, and it was just going to be house after house, like mega mansion after mega mansion after mega mansion. And that's really not your cup of tea. That's not your view of land and being outside and wilderness. By the way, do I know who the billionaire was? Would I know the name if you told me?
Oh, I can't tell you the name, but or I don't know that you would know. I don't think you would know the name. You would know the name, but really, yeah. I mean, it wasn't my cup of tea. We all find ourselves in places of life, and I was kind of going through a journey of. It was the biggest green space in the area at that time, and so I enjoyed managing it. But then it's, as it went away, then I went away.
Hey, what is the Triple Crown of backpacking?
Yeah, so the Triple Crown of backpacking is the 2,100-mile Appalachian National Scenic Trail. So you hike the entire trail. And then it would also be the completion of the 3,000-mile Continental Divide Trail, which goes through the Rockies from Mexico to Canada. And then also the 2,700-mile Pacific Crest Trail, which goes through California, Oregon, and Washington, Mexico to Canada. So it's the completion of those three trails is the Triple Crown.
And you've done all three, correct?
Yeah, I've done all three and have gone back for some more since.
Oh, wow.
How many people have done that Triple Crown, though?
I'm really not sure. I just kind of not a person that really pays attention to like the resume part of it.
Like milestones. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's more about the experience than it is just kind of like the resume points. But I was fortunate enough to have that experience, and I was lucky enough that I got to do it like 20 years ago.
Right.
Even though I'm not that old of a person, but I was able to do it when I was younger and before, the trails were a lot less populated at that time. We didn't have smartphones either, so it was a little different.
Hey, so in order to do the American Perimeter Trail, you knew that it was going to be a hike that was going to take you years in order to complete, like a several years hike, if you will, in order to get through. I guess the part that I never thought of, and by the way, shame on me because I should have, but when you start talking about like getting ready to, and I don't mean like, oh, I put my shoes on and I'm leaving, but like what it takes to get ready to start out on a hike like that, the training that goes into it, where you are hiking every single day just to be ready to hike on the trail, having to sell off all your stuff. You're going to be gone for years. It's not like I don't know how long it took you to do the Appalachian Trail, but you're going home after that. You're going away for years.
Yeah, you make it sound like a sentence, like you're getting put away for years and going to the big house. But it's very cerebral. So, you mentioned the physical part of it. So though I physically had to be ready to go from day one, and I was ready to do 30 and 40 mile days from the beginning. But really the cerebral part of it was the knowing that not that you're just going to be away for a couple of years, but you may be spending a couple of years alone.
Right.
And I did. Yeah. And I think that was probably, that aspect of it is something that I don't know that you can really prepare for. Maybe you're just kind of built for it in some ways.
Hey, can we talk about your friend Sean for a moment?
Yeah.
So Sean was going to hike the first part of the trail with you. He was going to go out there with you, and then he ultimately ends up dying before the hike ever gets underway. But did he die? And maybe you can explain this to everybody, Rue. Did he die on that day that you had been kind of quote warned about in the future?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for letting me talk about my friend Sean. So, there's this part. If you read, if you get the book and you read about this, there's a part where I have this premonition, very strong premonition about a date, and I journal about it, and I, for some reason, had had this kind of like horrible feeling around a specific date on a calendar that was right before I left for the trail. And I'm not really necessarily a person who ascribes to any kind of supernatural beliefs, but on that day, I woke up and I just had this feeling of dread, like, oh no, it's that day, because I had been thinking about this for a month or so. And ultimately, like, I almost got through that day and thought, oh, see, that was ridiculous. And unfortunately received a phone call at the very end of that day that my friend Sean, who was going to be hiking with me, had just passed. So, yeah.
And, you know, you read that in the book and you set that up where and you say the same thing. Like, I don't believe in any of that stuff, to the point where it's almost like, I don't want to say embarrassing, Rue, but where it's almost like you can't believe that this date is like sticking with you. And like you said, it's been, you know, a month, 6 weeks. And you're like, why is this date? I swear to God, when I got there and you were talking about Sean and the two of you being ready to go, and it's on that date, I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I felt the same way, right? But, you know, I was committed to this trek, and I was committed to this writing. So this book, you know, unapologetically gets very intense right from the beginning. And so, I'm putting out like feelings and thoughts there about stuff that might be, kind of like against my own sensibilities or embarrassing or seem ridiculous. But, you know, my mind is often that way. So I just wrote the way that my mind thinks.
It is raw, but I mean, it is very, and I mean, listen, not everything is like Sean. I mean, for example, the day that you're supposed to start the hike, you end up getting a ride because what are you going to do? Park your bike there for the next 4 years while you're out hiking? So you get a ride with Bob to go to the start of where your hike is going to start. It's got to start in some place. And then you're in a road rage incident. There's the people yelling at you in the parking lot. Bob's yelling, go around. It's like you can't even get out of the car to get started.
Yeah, you know, you hear this, you know, the beginning of every journey, every 1,000-mile journey starts with one step. Well, I was really thinking that I wasn't even going to get to the one step. I've been thinking of this day for a long time, and there was a lot of kind of energy and even anxiety building up to it. And we get to the trailhead, and unfortunately the person who was giving me a ride and someone else at the trailhead decided to get in a pissing contest with their vehicles. And so, you know, I'm in the passenger side. Bob is trying to parallel park. He's running the truck, you know, he's so insistent on it and not going to let the guy behind us go that he's like running the truck up the side of a tree so that it's just taking on damage with just full resolve. And the gentleman behind us is screaming and yelling at us. And I was like, this is one heck of a way. I haven't even stepped onto the trail, and I think we're going to end up in handcuffs here.
Right. And all you want to do is get out of the car. I'm going walking for the next 4 years. Just let me out. And I will say this.
Just get me away from this craziness.
Rue, you do such a great job. I want to give you a ton of credit for something that is, quote, nothing. You do such a great job of saying, so you get out of the car and all that gets situated. You get out to the trail or the trailhead and you're going to start. And again, you haven't done anything, but
nothing's happened.
You do such a good job of building up the anxiety, the anticipation of, as soon as I take one step, I've started. Mm-hmm. And it's going to go on for years. That anxiety and that anxiousness of just getting ready to take that first step, like it doesn't cross my mind, right? Like I've never done anything like that. But boy, you make that first step sound so intense.
Well, I think that there is probably there's probably more adventures and more experiences that people haven't had in the world because of that moment. That's the crux. It's the breaking moment. And trust me, I wanted to ditch several times leading up to this, where I wanted to talk myself out of it in some way. And I think probably that's the difference between hiking the American Perimeter Trail and not, is getting through some of those tough stretches. And the first, I mean, it was brutal leading up to it. And really, if I had stalled and balked at starting the trail, the pandemic hadn't started yet.
Right.
And we would have ran into a global pandemic, and I would have probably never started.
Would have never gone.
So,
hey, one of
the
first things that you do when you get out on the trail is you throw the rock. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you?
Oh no, I was hoping you weren't going to bring that up.
I read the book, Rue. Come on. Can you tell the brief story of the rock?
Okay. The brief story of the rock is that I've mostly been a single man most of my adult life, but through my 20s, I was in a committed relationship, and I was with this person for, like all my 20s, and we did a lot of backpacking together, and so we were going out on an adventure, a 3,000-mile trek, and I just decided when we started the trek that I wanted to marry this person. And so I didn't really have money for a ring. And I knew like my partner wasn't probably into the bling anyways, being a little bit more non-traditional. So I picked up a 5-pound rock and put it in my pack and just decided I would carry that from Canada to Mexico as kind of like a symbol of my love, and then present that at the end of the trip instead of a ring. I would present the rock, because backpackers, we don't even have a piece of gear that weighs 5 pounds.
Right.
All of our stuff is lightweight. It's like the heaviest thing in my pack. And so I got to Mexico and I presented the rock, and we got engaged, and we started planning the wedding. And it was a couple months later that she told me that the affair had started before the trail,
right,
with my friend, and then that it continued after we got engaged and returned. So I had this rock. She gave the rock back like you give the ring back. And I had this rock. Yeah, I know. And so I don't know why, but for all these years in traveling, for some reason, this rock followed me. And the first step onto the American Perimeter Trail is above this beautiful, huge waterfall. And so I finally took out the rock and threw it down into the waterfall as a way of just symbolically moving on, turning the page.
Not so fast, not so fast. What did you say to the rock? Or are you not going to tell me?
Oh, Elliot, maybe I would tell you off air.
Damn you, Rue.
Yeah, no, before I threw it, the rock and I had just a little talk, and I whispered something into the rock, and then I threw it.
All right, a couple of other things. There is one thing that you say in the book, which I thought was really, really great. It's a saying that comes out of the book, where it says, you were afraid of the same thing that every human is afraid of, and that's not getting what you want. I thought that was a fantastic saying.
Yeah, I actually had said that to someone the other day, not even thinking about it, but and I don't use that very often. That's once a year, but it's people always give me like a strange look, as if I'm saying that they're selfish because they're not going to get what they want, and that's what they're afraid about. But even like wanting the health of your child is something that you want. So whether it's just like the health of a child or if it's like you want to be a billionaire, all of us are afraid of not getting what we want.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it was a great saying. All right, I got to start ripping through some stuff before it gets way too late. You know what I wasn't expecting to learn? I wasn't expecting to learn that for people who hike, mosquitoes are such a massive problem.
Oh my. Yeah, well, just imagine so you work with people there, and we don't always get along when we work with other people, right? So every once in a while you have like a person and you come into work and you're like, oh gosh, there they are again. And then they come up and they're like talking to you. You really don't want to interact, and maybe you avoid them a bit as you go throughout the day. Well, this is no different than like the mosquitoes. They're just there. You're at work. You've got to deal and manage them. And it's relentless. And it's brutal depending on the snow season. And this just happened, the time that I started the American Perimeter Trail just happened to be a really horrible season for it.
Right.
So, it'll change your entire life.
Hey, so during...
Just imagine... Yeah.
No, I was going to say, so during the course of this, like I learned about mosquitoes. Also, you ended up stitching, literally stitching, like the way I would go to a hospital and get stitched up. You stitched up your own feet. You cut sutures out of your own mouth. All that is fine. What the hell was that rash on your crotch?
Okay, so I had a situation where I got some heat exhaustion, and within a day or two of the heat exhaustion, I felt like I got stung in the middle of the night. I felt like I got stung like right in the scrotum by something. And I woke up the next morning to kind of investigate, and there was, it's called folliculitis. It's like a hot tub rash that was all around my midsection. But it really freaked me out because I had no idea what it was. It was like these boils, and it was disgusting. There were pustules all over my midsection. And of course, like, I have to walk with this, which is just constant, like a torture chamber between your legs. And, there's no relief. I have to walk out and walk through this. And I ended up going to a clinic, which I wasn't even sure if it was for humans or not, because there was a man standing outside with a chicken. And so they told me that was the clinic, but it was like an agrarian farming town. So like, I wasn't sure if the animal clinic was the vet, or where I was going. And I got to this clinic, and I talk about how there's the nurse practitioner. She comes in and she wants to examine the area. And it was a beautiful young lady, and it was a little bit uncomfortable, but she says to me, she's like, well, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, so I'm going to go get some more people. And she comes back with these two other beautiful women. So now I've got three, and I don't know why she thought that was going to make me feel more comfortable. But then, they were having issues that they were, examining, and she said, Katie, you get the flashlight, I'll get the handle, and Sarah, you manage the apple bag.
And by the way, all this is going on, the sutured feet, the sutures in your mouth, the apple bag, like all of that's going on. We're still very early in the hike. Most people would have quit and gone home. Yeah, we haven't even really. Yeah. I don't even know that rock's hit the bottom of the water yet, and you're still going. And then the other thing that there is a point where Rue, and again, this is still very early on, where you literally almost die early on in this, and there's a couple of hikers, and you meet a bunch of interesting people out on the trail, and you're kind of going in the opposite direction of everybody, so you're not going with them, so you're kind of just passing them, and some of them are very interesting, and some of them are just kind of just quick in interactions and meetings, but you do almost end up dying, and it turns out the group of people that ultimately help save you originally kind of forgot about you while you were just laying there on the ground. And eventually they remember late in the day, they were like, oh yeah, I think we passed that guy just laying on the ground dying.
Yeah, well, marijuana affects short-term memory. So, but yeah, I mean, I had a situation where I was talking about the heat exhaustion, and I was in a really bad way with a fever, and I wasn't sure if it was an infection coming from my mouth that I had just had oral surgery on, or if it was where I stitched my toes together, where I did some stitch work there. But I was very sick, and and to the point where I was getting like delirious, and there were some hikers that came past, and I was begging them, like, get help, send for help. There was a dirt road nearby, and they went into town. Later that night, a van came and picked me up, and they were in it. And the next day, I was just so grateful and thanking them for going and getting help. And they and they told me they actually had gotten into town and completely forgotten about me, and were just forgot about it. And they were talking to this guy, and they say, "You see anything neat today? See anything cool?" You're like, "Oh yeah. Well, now that you mention it, we saw like this guy dying on the side of the trail." And it was like, we probably ought to go get him. And they were like, "That's a great idea." Yeah.
But you know what that does turn into, though. There's a blurb in the book after that, and they come back, and obviously they come back, and everything starts to turn for the good. But you do say that on the trail, and I don't know if it's the Appalachian or what the other two are, or on the American Perimeter Trail, but you do say that there is the dilemma of, do you help or do you walk by? And a lot of people find themselves being, I don't want to say guilty, but being able to check both of those boxes at different times.
I think if we're honest with ourselves, we can check both boxes. I mean, I can think of the time when I'm the Good Samaritan and the time where I'm just the passerby. And so in the book, I try to be honest as much as I can about not just talking about others, but usually when I'm speaking about others in the book, it's just a reflection of myself. And I point that out. But,
right.
But both, I mean, I think that we all like to think of ourselves as the hero, but really, given any circumstance and situation, who knows how we'll truly react. And that's a great part of getting to do something like the American Perimeter Trail, is because I got put into so many scenarios where I actually got to find out what I would do, instead of just what I like sitting at home thinking I would do, like sitting home on the couch, sitting home on the couch being like, well, I would do this. Of course. Look at them. When people watch TV and they're like, oh, they're so stupid. Why would they do that? And it was nice to put myself into some tough and stupid situations and see which person I was at that time.
Hey, so Rue, let me ask you this. In total, remind me, how long did it take you? How long did it take you to do the Perimeter Trail?
It took me 3 years.
3 years, Jesus Christ! Yeah. And then how? Like we meet some people, or we learn about some people in Volume 1. Do we Do we get recurring characters? I mean, these are all real people. I don't want to call them recurring characters, and I also don't want to give everything away. But there's certain people that we meet. Do they pop up again later on in the book, or in the? Yeah, now we're talking.
They do. Yeah, they do. There are some. We call them characters. I would call them friends. But
oh, sorry.
Yeah, they. they do pop up later. You know, what starts to happen in the other volumes is, so as far as storytelling, the other volumes, it gets pretty bare. I mean, it's just me for weeks. But there are characters that come in and out because, as you'll find out in volume 2, that's where the gunplay starts.
Right.
Where there's no gunplay in volume 1. But, there are some people who come and go, throughout the journey. And even when I finished, there's some people who I met along the way that were there at the end.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Hey, last two things. Number one, if people, what is the easiest way for, if people were interested in learning more about the American Perimeter Trail, in helping out with the American Perimeter Trail, in being a volunteer or donating to it, what's the easiest way for people to do that?
Real quick, so the American Perimeter Trail Conference is I'm the executive director of the American Perimeter Trail Conference, which is the 501c3 nonprofit, which is building the American Perimeter Trail. And you can contribute or become a member at www.americanperimetertrail.org.
And then the last thing, I don't know if you have volume 1 in front of you, do you, Rue?
Yeah, I have it here.
Page 20, if you don't mind.
Page 20. Okay. I don't even know what's on page 20.
I do. I wrote it down. I can help you if you need help.
Okay, let me.
I'm going to read one little blurb from page 20. Are you ready?
I am ready.
People told me I should write a book. I was not interested in that either. Aren't in hindsight you're kind of glad you did?
I am. Yeah. Yeah, in hindsight, I'm glad I did. I had a lot of attitudes going into the American Perimeter Trail that weren't antisocial, but I just, the attention was kind of like getting attention. I don't know, just having a little bit of, like, I don't know, I'm just a personal person and just didn't want to kind of put my life out there, but I'm glad that I did. And it's been cathartic for me in a lot of ways. It's not only like documented what happened. I've had some fun with it. But also like, I hope that people just reading about the adventure of it,
right,
that they learn some more about the greater implications of the conservation project that we're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm thrilled that you did. The volume 1 was so good, Rue, honestly. The American Perimeter Trail, Volume 1 West, a 14,000-mile journey. Rue, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the book, my friend.
Thank you so very much. We'll talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rue.
Okay, take care.